Hare Krishna, everyone. Sorry for the abrupt stoppage, as Prabhupada used the word stoppage, of the video, but we received a call on the Skype, and inadvertently, somehow or other, it stopped the recording. So now we're going to continue with the second part of this session, which is going to be labeled SB 11.20.4, and we're going to begin to read the fourth verse of the 20th chapter again. Verse 4. My dear Lord, to understand those things beyond direct experience, such as spiritual liberation or the attainment of heaven and similar material enjoyments, and in general to understand the means and the end of all things, it is imperative that the forefathers, demigods, and human beings consult the Vedic literatures, for these literatures, being your own laws, constitute the highest evidence and revelation. Purport. One might argue that while human beings are certainly prone to ignorance, the elevated forefathers and demigods are considered to be all-knowing within universal affairs. If such superior beings would communicate with the earth, then everyone could bypass Vedic knowledge in achieving his personal desire. This concept is denied here by the words Vedash Chakshu. Even the demigods and forefathers have at best an ambiguous conception of the supreme liberation, and even in material affairs they are subject to personal frustration. Although the demigods are all-powerful in awarding material benedictions to inferior species such as human beings, they are sometimes thwarted in their personal programs of sense gratification. A rich businessman, for example, may have no difficulty paying the insignificant salary of one of his innumerable workers, but the same wealthy man may be completely frustrated in his dealings with his own family and friends, and may also be defeated in his attempts to expand his fortune by further investments. Although a rich man appears to be all-powerful to his subordinate workers, he must personally struggle to fulfill his personal desires. Similarly, the demigod forefathers encounter many difficulties in maintaining and expanding their celestial standard of living. They must therefore constantly take shelter of superior Vedic knowledge. Even in the administration of cosmic affairs, they strictly follow the guidelines of the Vedas, which are the laws of God. If such fabulous entities as demigods must take shelter of the Vedas, we can just imagine the position of human beings who are frustrated at virtually every step of their lives. Every human being should accept Vedic knowledge as the highest evidence in material and spiritual affairs. Uddhava points out to the Lord that if one accepts the authority of Vedic knowledge, it is seemingly impossible to reject the concept of material piety and sin. Thus, Uddhava persists in examining the Lord's controversial statement at the end of the last chapter. Text 5. My dear Lord, the distinction observed between piety and sin comes from your own Vedic knowledge and does not arise by itself. If the same Vedic literature subsequently nullifies such distinction between piety and sin, there will certainly be confusion. Purport. In the Bhagavad Gita 15:15, Lord Krishna states, Vedaish Chisarvair Aham eva Vedyaha. By all the Vedas, I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta, and I know the Veda as it is. Vedic knowledge emanates from the breathing of the personality of Godhead. Therefore, whatever Lord Krishna speaks is Veda, or perfect knowledge. The Vedic literatures are full of descriptions of piety and sin, but Lord Krishna's statement that one should transcend piety and sin is also to be understood as Vedic knowledge. Sri Uddhava has understood this point and therefore requests Lord Krishna to clear up an apparent contradiction. Ultimately, the material world gives the living entities a chance to satisfy their perverted desires, and at the same time gradually achieve the liberation of going back home, back to Godhead. Thus, material piety must be considered a means and never an absolute end. Since the material world itself is not absolute, being temporary and limited. The personality of Godhead is himself the reservoir of all virtue and goodness. Those persons and activities that please the Lord are to be considered virtuous, and those that displease him are to be considered sinful. There cannot be any other permanent definition of these terms. If one becomes a mundane moralist, forgetting the Supreme Lord, one's position is certainly imperfect, and one will not achieve the ultimate goal of piety, going back home, back to Godhead. On the other hand, there is a great fear among moralists that if the distinction between piety and sin is minimized, people will commit many atrocities in the name of God. In the modern world, there is no clear understanding of spiritual authority, and mortal men consider any appeal to transcend morality to be an invitation to fanaticism, anarchy, violence, and corruption. Thus, they regard material moral principles as more important than directly trying to please God. Because this point is controversial, Uddhava is anxiously requesting the Lord to give a clear explanation. It just comes to mind the verse in the Gita, Trigunya Vishaya Veda, Nishtrigunya Bhavarjana. He's asking Arjuna to rise above the three modes of material nature. And this seems contradictory because he's giving him all the different laws of nature that should or shouldn't be followed. And they're his laws. So this is the gist of the controversy that Uddhava is trying to get Krishna to clear up. So even pure devotees might ask questions that question something, but they ask it in such a way as to go deeper into the conclusion and not to defeat the authority. Very important distinction. Text 6. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "My dear Uddhava, because I desire that human beings may achieve perfection, I have presented three paths of advancement: the path of knowledge, the path of work, and the path of devotion. Besides these three, there is absolutely no other means of elevation." Purport. Ultimately, the goal of philosophical speculation, pious regulated work, and devotional service is the same: Krishna consciousness. As stated by the Lord in the Bhagavad Gita 4.11, Yeyatha mam prapadyante, tangs tataiva bhajamyaham, mamavart manuvartante, manushak parthasarvashaha. All of them, as they surrender unto me, I reward accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects, O son of Pritha. Although all authorized processes of human perfection ultimately lead to Krishna consciousness or love of God, various performers have specific propensities and qualifications, and thus gravitate to different methods of self-realization. Lord Krishna here describes the three authorized processes together in order to emphasize that their ultimate goal is one. At the same time, philosophical speculation and regulated pious work can never be considered equal to pure love of Godhead, as the Lord has elaborately clarified in the previous chapters. The word trayak, or three, indicates that despite their ultimate oneness of purpose, the three paths display diversity in progress and achievement. One cannot achieve the same result by mere speculation or piety that one achieves by directly surrendering to the personality of Godhead, depending completely on His mercy and friendship. The word karma here indicates work dedicated to the personality of Godhead, as described in the Bhagavad Gita 3.9. Yagyar tat kamano yat kamanonyatra lokoyam karmabandhanaha tadartang karmakonteya muktasanga samachara. Work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. Otherwise, work binds one to this material world. Therefore, O son of Kunti, perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction, and in that way you will always remain unattached and free from bondage. In the process of jnana, one seeks impersonal liberation by merging into the glaring effulgence of the personality of Godhead. Such liberation is considered hellish by the devotees, because by merging, one loses all awareness of the supreme blissful feature of the Lord as Bhagavan, the Supreme Person. The performers of karma, or regulated work, seek the three aspects of human progress, other than liberation, namely religiosity, economic development, and sense gratification. The fruitive workers think that by exhausting each of their innumerable material desires, they will gradually come out of the dark tunnel of material existence into the clear light of spiritual liberation. This process is very dangerous and uncertain, because not only is there virtually no limit to material desires, but even a slight flaw in the process of regulated work constitutes sin and throws one off the path of progressive life. The devotees directly aim for love of Godhead and are therefore most pleasing to the Supreme Lord. In any case, all three divisions of Vedic elevation depend completely on the mercy of Lord Krishna. One cannot progress along any one of these paths without the blessings of the Lord. Other Vedic processes, such as austerity, charity, and so forth, are included within the three primary divisions described here. Text 7. Among these three paths, Jnana Yoga, the path of philosophical speculation, is recommended for those who are disgusted with material life and who are thus detached from ordinary fruitive activities. Those who are not disgusted with material life, having many desires yet to fulfill, should seek perfection through the path of Karma Yoga. Purport. In this verse, the Lord reveals the different propensities that lead human beings to adopt different processes of perfection. Those who are frustrated in the ordinary material life of society, those who are frustrated in the ordinary material life of society, friendship, and love, and who understand that promotion to heaven simply brings further domestic miseries, take directly to the path of knowledge. Through authorized philosophical discrimination, they transcend the bonds of material existence. Those who are still desirous of enjoying material society, friendship, and love, and who are excited by the prospect of going with their relatives to material heavenly planets, cannot take directly to the path of rigorous philosophical advancement, which requires great austerity. Such persons are advised to remain in family life and offer the fruits of their work to the Supreme. In this way, they also can become perfect and gradually learn detachment from material life. Text 8. If somehow or other, by good fortune, one develops faith in hearing and chanting my glories, such a person, being neither very disgusted, again, if somehow or other, by good fortune, one develops faith in hearing and chanting my glories, such a person, being neither very disgusted with, nor very much attached to material life, should achieve perfection through the path of loving devotion to me. Purport. If somehow or other one gets the association of pure devotees of the Lord, and hears from them the transcendental message of Lord Krishna, then one has the chance to become a devotee of the Lord. As mentioned in the previous verse, those who become disgusted with material life take to impersonal philosophical speculation and rigorously try to stamp out any trace of personal existence. Those who are still attached to material sense gratification try to purify themselves by offering the fruits of their ordinary activities to the Supreme. A first-class candidate for pure devotional service, on the other hand, is neither completely disgusted with nor attached to material life. He does not desire to pursue ordinary material existence any further because it cannot award real happiness. Nevertheless, a candidate for devotional service does not give up all hope for perfecting personal existence. A person who avoids the two extremes of material attachment and impersonal reaction to material attachment, and who somehow or other gets the association of pure devotees, faithfully hearing their message, is a good candidate for going back home, back to Godhead, as described here by the Lord. So, Hare Krishna, this is a wonderful, gradual, and detailed explanation of the gradual process the Vedic scriptures prescribe to gradually come to the point of pure devotional service. And with that, I'm going to have to stop because I'm coming to the end of my sitting in a chair for tonight. And please don't mind. We've been going on for about 45 minutes, and 45 minutes is about my limit in a chair to this point. So okay, here we are. Our favorite time of reflections. The open mic, or in the case of those listening out there in the cyberspace, well, Gopal Rai Das, one of my favorite persons on the earth, is watching. Hare Krishna, Gopal. Missing you. He asks, I was going to ask how one attains attachment for hearing the glories of the Lord, but the purport answers nicely. By hearing from the devotees of the Lord, one gets attachment for hearing. Okay, I don't want to read this next part. Like hearing Maharaj every evening with a big smile and a heart. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. Well, I mean, Prabhupada had this great gift, of grasping the concept and then putting it in very simple English so that anyone could understand. So the main point that he makes in this question is that it's a universal principle, that we achieve the qualities we achieve by the association of those qualities. It's association that allows us to develop different qualities. And even Bhagavad Gita said, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, karanam gunasangasyo sarasat gunakarmaso. I can't remember the Sanskrit. Anyway, it means that by association with the modes of nature, a person attains a certain quality of nose, ears, mouth, in other words, the gross body, by association with the modes of nature. So that's the principle. So here Krishna is saying that if you associate with pure devotees, by good fortune, and also Krishna says in the 13th chapter of the Gita, verse 26. Do we have a Gita? We have a Gita. This is another aspect of the answer to the question of how association can bring us to this point. It's very helpful to learn the books so thoroughly that we can see the connections between one verse one place and another verse in another place. It helps us to go deep. So in the 26th verse of the 13th chapter, Krishna says this. Again, this is 13:26, Bhagavad Gita. Again, there are those who, although not conversant in spiritual knowledge, begin to worship the Supreme Person upon hearing about Him from others. Because of their tendency to hear from authorities, they also transcend the path of birth and death. And also, Prabhupada always also mentions the concept of fortune, good fortune. That good fortune is a product of what is called agyata sukriti. In one's sojourn through the material existence, through the material world, in life after life, sometimes he comes in contact with a pure devotee without knowing it. He'll be walking down the street and our kirtan party will be going by and they'll look and they'll say, wow, that's far out. But they don't act on it, they don't realize what it is, and they walk on. And then at some later point they may have been given a piece of prasadam or something, and they taste it and they say, wow, this is something special, and still they don't act on it. Well, when this agyata sukriti, or fortune, or good fortune, builds up in a person's heart after contact with pure devotees in devotional service to the Lord, then when one becomes fortunate enough, one starts, at that birth, one has a tendency to hear from authority. And then when they hear from a devotee, they're inclined to hear. They actually become attracted and become inclined to hear. And in that way, they transcend the person. They get an attachment by association for hearing about Krishna. And by the association of Krishna, of course, they transcend the modes of material nature. So it's the taste for hearing about Krishna, his instructions, his activities, the activities of his pure devotees, that brings us devotional service. And in fact, just that process of doing it even in the beginning is devotional service. Even if a person is ignorant, he can become a pure devotee just by hearing innocently. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that if one chants the holy name without offense, one can immediately attain love of God by great fortune. And some of the conditions that might cause that to happen are extreme suffering. If out of extreme suffering, where there's no other thing to do, and one just says, "Oh, Krishna," or even "God, help me," it immediately propels one or elevates one to, or if in force of circumstances, there's a great danger or something. And in this way, there's always an opportunity. Not always, but there is always an opportunity for the souls to come in contact with devotional service and get a taste for hearing about Krishna. And of course, we've heard, from Krishna, and we'll hear in more detail from Krishna, the answer to this apparent contradiction, how we have to follow the Vedas, and at the same time we have to transcend the laws of the Vedas. It's an apparent contradiction. And apparent contradictions are reconciled how? In Krishna. So we'll hear about this later on. And please forgive me, oh dear ones out there in cyberspace, but I've just come to the end of my ability. Wait, there's somebody else? Something else? This is Hannah. Hey, Hare Krishna, Hannah. Hare Krishna, Srila Gurudev, Pam Ho. All glories to the Bhagavatam. Srila Prabhupada, and you are a truly spiritual warrior. We read that one should have a strong desire for devotional life and disinterest in material things. We read also that one can maintain steady remembrance of Krishna by constant devotional service. I feel I have some desire, but I also have a desire for material things because they're easier than devotional service due to my conditioning. Some days that overwhelms my desire to want to do devotional service, and it seems like a back and forth between the two. So if we lack desire to do devotional service, but read, one must do it constantly to have an effect on the heart, how can we reawaken the natural desire enough to be consistent in our sadhana and seva? This is a wonderful question. The question is actually answered already by the purports, by my godbrothers' empowered purports. Prabhupada empowered them. And it's the same answer that I just gave to Gopal, and that is the association of Krishna, the association of Krishna's pure devotees in any form, meaning hearing and chanting with them and of them, will bring us to the place of consistent pure devotional service. And as we heard just now in the purport, if we're not able to do that, in between, we should be very careful to try to follow the rules and regulations of the mode of goodness. Because even if we don't have a pure taste or a strong enough taste to be fixed in the hearing and chanting, then we have to associate with the modes of material nature in a way that will release the tightness of the grip. The tightness of the grip of the three modes of material nature is most tight in the mode of ignorance, and a little less tight in the mode of passion, and much less tight in the mode of goodness. So from your position, you have to read the Gita very carefully, analyze or hear the differences between the effects of the emotive goodness, passion, and ignorance in knowledge, in understanding, in work, in yourself, in a worker, in food. All those things are described. 14th, 17th, 18th chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. And that's all they have time for, please. Sudevi says, Maharaj, please accept my basic glories to Srila Prabhupada. He says nectar. She says. And we have so many nice comments. Hey, Vijay. Vijay Govinda, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Here I am, so close and yet so far away. I'm in the UK, but I'm, barricaded up in this flat in Hythe, and I'm not allowed to go out. Not only that, I'm not allowed to have anybody come in. So here we are. But I definitely will be here long enough that we will be able to get together. Surely, physically. I look forward to that day. Hare Krishna, that moment. And that's it for me, kids. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. The Uddhava Gita ki jai. Uddhava's transcendental questions ki jai. All glories to all the devotees of the Lord. See you tomorrow. Gaur Premanandi. Hari Hari Bol. Hare Krishna.